making.
Hey, good morning everyone. We're out here in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, right up against the foothills, putting up a 4-point shade sail at this beautiful residence. Just wanted to go over how we picked the connection points. So as you can see here, over on the garage, we picked the two corners of the outside garage, which are going to be typically double studs. It's going to provide the strongest point of attachment, and then by also that's going to allow this to increase. And then the other thing you can see is we ended up burying the post. What is this? Probably 6-inch diameter steel. Again, it's not a 4x4 wood post or anything like that. It's very structural. It's very significant. Set down into the ground. Dug the hole first. Dropped the post down in there. Poured the concrete around it. And then again, you can see that pretty much everything we do, we're going to want the post tilted out away from the tension. So these things are very sturdy, and we'll go ahead and get the hardware set up. We'll get it measured and walk through that real quick. All right, so again, you have two options when you're measuring for the shade sails. This particular one here, we have a turnbuckle on all four corners. You want to go ahead, if you're going to go this route, put your turnbuckles up, string the rope through the shackles, and then you can see where we're basically holding the tape measure, and that's where you're going to measure from point to point. This one here is sloped, so we're only going to need one dimension as far as the diagonal, and that's basically when you send the dimensions into us, that's how we're going to double check that, is we'll take your widths that you provide, all four, and then what you're pulling for a diagonal, we'll put that on the computer, and that's going to tell us how accurate it is. So the other option is if you do not have the hardware up, you can measure from basically the attachment point, which is either going to be an eye bolt or you know, a bracket maybe that you've purchased online somewhere, but you're basically going to measure to that exact same point around. And then if you're using a single turnbuckle, we're just going to want to know what corner that you're planning on installing that turnbuckle, and we'll make that deduction. And there's usually three sizes of the turnbuckles. You can have 8, 10, or 12 millimeters. So now that we have this measured, we'll go through the installation process and getting this strung up. All right, so your shade sail is showing up at your house here. You're going to identify what corner is the whip, and again, we will have that on a drawing for you that you looked at, and you're going to be able to identify that with these basically two wire nuts here. And again, the whip is going to be long, it's going to run down in here, and when it shows up, we will have these tightened for you. But if you cannot get this corner to that last connection, you're going to want to loosen these up and then get this to the turnbuckle itself, and then tighten the nuts back up. And then that's basically good to allow you to final the tension to pull out the last little bit of slack that should be in your shade sail. So, but that's a big thing. Get it out, unroll it, figure out which side your whip's on, what corner that's on, and then again, that's going to make sure that is your last attachment point that you're actually going to affix to the post. Okay. All right, so we've taken the shackle off, and the idea is this is what's referred to as the D-ring. And with having the slot for it, it allows basically the tension when we're tensioning the corners. It's going to tension both the sail and the cable at the same time. A lot of the products you see out there, basically they're going to have like just a little hog ring, not even a D-ring on it, and it's just going to be a single layer. There's no cable in the shade sail, so when you're pulling it, it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on basically those stitch lines. The other thing that's unique to what we do things a little bit different is what we call the triple reinforcement. So you can see this here is double layered, so that's essentially 4 layers of fabric once it's done on both sides, and then we sew a big patch in the corner as well. And then you're also going to have the loop out here. Again, ideally all your tension is on the corners, and this is how we make our sails, which is unique to Four Seasons. So your last corner, you're not going to be able to hand pull that like what we ended up struggling to get that there, and that was the third of the 4 corners. So basically there's several names for this. Hand winch come along. Some people can even use a heavier ratchet strap where you wrap it around the post, and then basically that's what you'll do here. So we're going to take this, wrap it around the post, and we're basically just pulling this last corner to where we can get it tightened into the shackle. And then once that's done, we can finish the tensioning of it with using just the turnbuckle. So what we had is we had a little excess cable in some of the corners, and by loosening those wire nuts, all we've managed to do here is pulled out the slack of that cable, and then again, the excess cable we're just going to put back into the pocket, He'll tighten those wing nuts or the lock nuts up on the wire nuts, and then we'll go ahead and finish tensioning it. So, but if you do have some cable that's hanging out or there's a little bit extra, loosen those up, just pull it through, and you want all that cable as tight as possible as far as hand pulling it before you start turning the turnbuckles. Just as a little tidbit, the nut size on those wire nuts is going to be one of two sizes. It's either going to be a 6 or an 8, so that way you're not having to guess what size socket to find to tighten those up. And you do want a socket, you're not going to want to try to use an open or a closed wrench. So here's another little secret, is using like a lithium lubricant. You can find these used a lot for lubricating chop saws, band saws and stuff to keep them from getting hot and binding up. But what you'll do is you'll put this on the threads for the turnbuckles before you tighten everything up, and then what that's going to do is it'll keep that, and we refer to it as seizing up. I'm sure there's a more technical term, but and if you just do this right before you put it on every time, you'll make sure that those, because again, you're trying to tighten these threads up under a tremendous amount of tension once we start pulling on this. All right, so we have all 4 corners connected, and you're going to see that even before we've tightened a single thing, that there is probably more tension in this than what you're going to find on most of the shade sails that you're going to purchase online. And we haven't even turned a single turnbuckle. You can see the excess fabric in here, and once we start turning on this, you're going to watch all of that disappear. And pull on that for me, will you, Ty? So you can see how loose this is right now, and we'll do the same thing once it's all finished and tightened up, and you're going to see the difference. But even right there is minimal movement compared to what you're going to purchase online. Alright, so we've gone through and basically adjusted these so the thread length on all these is pretty similar. You don't necessarily have to have that, but you know, it's just kind of the small little details you're paying attention to. And then the last thing you do is once you have those turnbuckles tight, you're going to see that there's a nut on those. You're going to go ahead and put that nut down to where that turnbuckle cannot come undone. And now with the final tension, you can see what this is at. So again, this is not going to pocket air. You're going to want the air to roll over the top of it. And that should be it for how you install a shade sail. And then basically when you're taking it down, you're just going to go back through the reverse process. You're going to loosen your corner with the whip first, and then make sure you loosen everything else up. You can leave your hardware up if you want to or not. The only thing you really want to pay attention to every year is to identify what corner that whip was on and make sure that corner is the same every year. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll look forward to hearing from you soon.